how did your experience in the Marines impacted your writing and your films?
Well, it's actually had quite a bit of an impact because that's kind of how I got hired to write Rambo III by Stallone. I wrote a screenplay called Firebase, which was not based really on my experiences that much as some other people's experiences. It was about Vietnam. It was basically, you ever seen a movie called Zulu? So I saw Zulu. I thought it was a terrific movie. And I got this idea about doing Zulu and setting it in Vietnam. Like a small group of Army soldiers and Marines on a hilltop, on a fire base on a hilltop, attacked by North Vietnamese and Viet Cong. Anyways, I wrote this screenplay, and my agent sent it to Stallone. He was looking for a co-writer for Rambo III, and he liked the screenplay. He actually ended up hiring me to work for his company, for White Eagle Productions. I ended up co-writing Rambo III with him. So that was, my service in the Marines had some impact on that. And then I've written a number of screenplays that have been about Marines and soldiers, things like that. Very few of them have been made, like Firebase never got made. Stallone loved it, but he never got around to making it. And just a few years ago, I wrote one about a Marine Corps dog called Max. That got turned into a movie. And a lot of my screenplays have had characters who were former military that would then use their skills back when they were back in the United States to help them with some kind of an action situation. Pretty much hearkening back to Rambo III, because that's what Rambo's all about. He's this ex-military guy who uses his skills against various bad guys in the U.S. and in Vietnam, Mexico, other places like that. And I've written a few like that. So I would say my military experiences have actually had a very significant impact on my writing career.
I read that you would like to make a movie about Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And I was curious about what are your favorite movies on the subject, and what do you feel that still remains to be told about the conflict? Still remains to be approached in cinema.
Right. Well, my favorite is Platoon. I think Platoon is the most realistic Vietnam movie that I've seen so far, and it was written and directed by somebody who was actually there, by Oliver Stone. So that's the very best. And then there's some other ones that I've liked, but none of them have really knocked me out. I thought Apocalypse Now, well, it's an interesting film. It's a pretty magnificent piece of cinema, but it's very inaccurate regarding the Vietnam experience. Full Metal Jacket, I think the boot camp scenes are fantastic. I love all the boot camp scenes. They're very accurate, very realistic. The Vietnam scenes don't really work all that well for me in Full Metal Jacket. And most of that came from a book called Dispatches by a journalist named Michael Hare, who was, I'm not sure, I think Michael Hare might have actually been over in Vietnam doing some reporting. I believe he was, in fact. But it wasn't all that accurate as far as I'm concerned. Not nearly as good as Platoon. I saw another Vietnam-based movie just recently called The Five Bloods, a Spike Lee movie, which I actually didn't make it all the way through the movie, I have to admit. I liked parts of it, especially towards the beginning, when it's post-Vietnam. These vets who knew each other there all get together. That stuff was kind of good. I liked the part about the one soldier discovering that he had a daughter that he had fathered that was living in Vietnam, that was now an adult. But once it got into the battle scenes, I thought the battle scenes were very poorly done. And I just found myself not caring about the story. There were just a lot of confusing things about the Five Bloods, and ultimately I found it very disappointing. Another film that I found really interesting that dealt with Vietnam, but in a kind of a circuitous manner, was Tropic Thunder. I like Tropic Thunder. It's a comedy. Tropic Thunder is, I almost wonder if somebody read my screenplay Firebase, because there were a lot of scenes in Tropic Thunder that reminded me of scenes in Firebase, although highly exaggerated and comedic. And after seeing that film, I just wondered if my script Firebase ever got turned into a movie. I'm just wondering if people could take it seriously. If you've seen Tropic Thunder, then you see Firebase right afterwards. Firebase is going to seem almost like a comedy, because there's so much stuff in Tropic Thunder that's similar to it. So there's a few other Vietnam films that are not really coming to mind right now. But again, I'll come back to my contention that the best one so far is Platoon. When I walked out of the theater after seeing Platoon, I was kind of shaken up, actually. I was actually feeling grateful that I made it back alive after seeing Platoon.
Very powerful film.
It was, yeah.
I love it. Do you have any future plans for a film about them?
I just don't think I could write a better script than Firebase. It's a really terrific screenplay. I actually had a director that wanted to make it years ago, was Walter Hill. I actually had a meeting with Walter Hill and Joel Silver. They both wanted to turn it into a movie. Walter was going to direct it. Joel Silver was going to produce it. They had a deal at Paramount at the time. And so they went to the head of Paramount with this project. Hey, we want to do this movie called Firebase. And Paramount, I guess the marketing people looked at it, and this is before Platoon and a lot of these other Vietnam movies. There was a whole period where there were a number of Vietnam movies made. So there were a number of films that were being made, but this is before that. This is before Platoon or any of those. And Paramount said no. Well, a few years later, Platoon gets made, wins Oscars. I can't remember, did it win the Oscar for Best Picture?
I think so.
It won a few Oscars, though. And afterwards, I ran into Walter Hill at a Directors Guild meeting. And Walter and I started talking, and he said to me, if Paramount wouldn't have been so stupid and made that movie, Firebase, that would have been us up there on the stage at the Oscars. So that was one hell of a compliment. But I think by then, once Platoon and these other movies came out, then there seemed to be a lack of interest in any Vietnam movie. And I actually, when I met with Stallone, because he had loved that script so much, he told me, I'm going to make this movie. I'm going to be in this movie. We're going to make this movie. But even Sylvester Stallone, who at that time was the biggest star in the world, he couldn't get anybody to sign off on it. Well, of course, it's expensive too. It's a big, expensive movie. Lots of battle scenes that take place at night, helicopters, jets, all kinds of stuff. So it just never got made. But that's, and I've had so many people that have read the script and have fallen in love with the script and have said, this thing's got to get made one of these days. But hasn't happened so far. But if anything, I can't write another Vietnam script that would be better than Firebase. So that's my ultimate. I'd love it if somebody would make it one of these days.
I hope it still gets made. Regarding your work with Stallone, how was your professional relation? What are the things that you remember most fondly of that period?
He and I, we just hit it off right away. We got along great. He had called me in to talk about Rambo III. But just coincidentally, he had been thinking about doing a French Foreign Legion movie. When I came in to meet with him, first I met with his development executive, this woman named Vicky Pasternak. And so I had a little pile of stuff that I brought with me. And on top was this magazine. It was called M Magazine. And there was a picture of a French Foreign Legionnaire on the cover. And she saw it and she said, "What's that?" "Oh, this is something I wanted to talk to Mr. Stallone about the French Foreign Legion movie." And she said, "Okay, just hold on a second." She goes to the other room, comes back. She's got the exact same magazine. And it turned out that Stallone had read the magazine also, and he wanted to make a French Foreign Legion movie. So I ended up getting a 2-year deal with Stallone's company. It was called White Eagle Productions. And I wrote 2 movies for them. One, I co-wrote Rambo III with Stallone. And number 2 was French Foreign Legion. That's what I titled it. It was French Foreign Legion. And what I had wanted to do, really, I wanted to do a classic French Foreign Legion movie that took place in, the classic period, the beau geste period with the, the white kepi and the neck cover and the fort in the middle of the desert. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted it to take place in the 1920s. And Stallone didn't want to do that version. He wanted to do a present day version of the French Foreign Legion. And the French Foreign Legion does exist. They've been in Afghanistan. They've been in Africa. They've done, they're like an elite force for the French military. So I ended up doing some research on that, and I wrote French Foreign Legion. My heart wasn't really in it because I still wanted to do that 1920s version. And that never got made, the French Foreign Legion script that I wrote for Stallone. But at the time that I was writing it, I had just met Jean-Claude Van Damme. And he had shot Bloodsport already. Bloodsport was sat on the shelf for about a year. And we hit it off. We got to be pretty good friends. So I told him, "Hey, look, I'm writing a French Foreign Legion script for Sylvester Stallone. Can I get some help from you with some of the French phrases, some of the French expletives, things like that?" So he actually helped me with that. So we started talking about the French Foreign Legion. We both thought, this would be a cool movie for you to be in, being that you speak French, you're from Belgium. Many Legionnaires did come from Belgium. And then the first movie I directed with Jean-Claude, Lionheart, I had him playing a French Foreign Legionnaire who deserts the Legion to go help his family in Los Angeles. But I still had this notion about doing a classic French Foreign Legion movie. And so we ended up doing that a few years later. I wrote a script with him called Legionnaire, which took place in the 20s. And that movie ended up getting made. Ed Pressman produced it, and it turned out to be one hell of a good movie.
Here in Portugal, the title, the translation of Lionheart was Legionnaire. The title for Lionheart was
Really?
Legionário.
Okay.
In Portuguese.
So Lionheart was called Legionnaire, but Lionheart so that's the 6th title for Lionheart that I know about, because it was originally called Wrong Bet. And then in England, they called it AWOL. In France, they called it Full Contact. Now you're telling me in Portugal, they called it Legionnaire. It's had like 6 or 7 titles. It's the 30th anniversary right now of Lionheart, by the way. It opened in United States January 19th.
I saw it on the big screen, although I was very young.
Oh, great!
My sister took me, and I remember perfectly that the copy that I saw, the title was Wrong Bet in the theater, and then I got the VHS sometime later, and in the VHS it was already Lionheart, but I remember
okay.
on the big screen it was the title card was Wrong Bet.
I never liked the title Wrong Bet. That was Jean-Claude's original idea for the title, because the way that can be interpreted, if a movie critic writes about it, they could always say, "Don't make the wrong bet. Stay away from this movie." So, anyways, I hated the title, and I'm the one who came up with the Lionheart title. And then they just, I don't think any of my other movies have this many alternate titles.
One of the most iconic is Double Impact. When you think about that experience, what comes to mind?
That was the first really big production that I worked on, and I had come up with that idea over at Canon Film, because Menachem had actually developed a script called The Corsican Brothers, and I thought, this sounds like a cool idea for Jean-Claude, where he would play two twin brothers. So I ended up writing the first version of it for Canon Films, for Menachem Golan. Menachem decided he didn't want to make the movie. And he never really had a lot of faith in Jean-Claude. He was happy that Bloodsport was making all this money, made a few other movies with Jean-Claude, but he didn't believe that Jean-Claude really had the legs to go all the way to become a big movie star. And I'll quote what he said to me was, Van Damme can't play one character. How do you expect him to play two? So we ended up not making it with Canon, but then I had sued Canon over another script that they hired me to write, which was Delta Force 3. And they didn't pay me all my money, which is a common issue that writers had with Canon. They would do some writing, they'd finish their work. Then when the second check was due, they wouldn't pay it, and they would just say, "Yeah, you don't like it, sue me." Well, that's what I did. I sued them, and for the rest of my money on Delta Force 3, and then they offered me a settlement because they knew they were going to lose. They knew that they had ripped me off, and they said, "Okay, we're going to give, if you drop all the charges and sign off and basically say this lawsuit's over, we will give you the rights to that script that you wrote for us, the one called The Corsican Brothers." So I did that because Jean-Claude had made a deal with Moshe Diamant to make a movie. And it was a script called Night of the Leopard. They ran into some legal technicalities over Night of the Leopard as far as owning the script. They couldn't get the script. So now they needed another script. And Jean-Claude said, "Hey, what's going on with that Corsican Brothers project?" And I told him, "Well, look, they just made me an offer to give me the rights to the Corsican Brothers script if I drop my lawsuit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll get the rights, and then we can sell them to Moshe." And so Jean-Claude mentioned this to Moshe too, and Moshe said, "Okay, if it's a good script, let's do it." And that's how Canon ended up losing what would have been an extremely lucrative project for them, and they gave it to Moshe Diamant instead, and we went on and made the movie, and the rest is movie history. People just love that movie, and to this very day, people love that movie.
It has infinite reruns on television.
Right.
Double Impact is always
playing. Yeah, always playing somewhere.
As someone whose work had such a big impact in the action genre, how do you see the transformations in paradigm shifts in the action?
The paradigm shift. Yeah, it's a very clear paradigm shift. where they decided, instead of getting guys like Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal and hoping that they can act, why don't we just get real actors and teach them how to do some action stuff, teach them how to do martial arts. The stuff they can't do, well, we got stunt doubles for that. So that's, I think, maybe the first movie that did that. I could be wrong about it being the first one, but 20th Century Fox had actually come to me about directing Speed, okay? And I liked the script. I was interested in doing it, and I asked them, well, so who are you talking to for playing the lead character? Who's going to star in this one? And they said, well, we're thinking about Keanu Reeves. And that really struck me as an odd choice, because all I knew about Keanu Reeves pretty much was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Which, you're going to make this guy an action star now, this geeky guy from Bill and Ted's? And turned out that they were right. Okay, Keanu Reeves has become this pretty big action star now. But basically, they just started going to real actors, people who had real acting chops, not any kind of action, credibility, martial arts, none of that. So so they started going to people like Keanu Reeves, Matt Damon, Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson wasn't the only thing he did that could be considered an action movie was Darkman, but you didn't even see his face for most of the movie, most of the action scenes. So that was the real shift, that they started going for guys like that. Now I think it's maybe swung back a bit the other way, because one of the biggest action stars today is Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and he came from the world of professional wrestling. It's not like he was doing Shakespeare in the Park, basically, but they turned him into an action star, and that worked out pretty damn good. Well, Jason Statham, of course, but Jason Statham was he was an athlete, but he was basically a swimmer. He was a high dive athlete, but he was in those few, I think, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and a few others like that. So he's kind of moved up, but he basically started out as an actor, because Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels was a crime film, not really an action film. So nowadays it's pretty hard to get somebody to take off the way that Jean-Claude did. They've been trying to do it with Scott Adkins. And Scott he's a good actor and a good martial artist. But that's the old paradigm. So Scott keeps working, he keeps making movies, but that doesn't seem to be what the audience wants to see nowadays. They don't want to see a Van Damme or Seagal type. They'd rather have Liam Neeson or Matt Damon doing these action pictures.
In 2000, you also worked with Dolph Lundgren.
Oh, Dolph, yeah.
How was the experience with him? Because it's interesting that action-wise, not only are your films and your scripts very, very important, but you also worked Stallone, Van Damme, and
Dolph. Yeah, Dolph was a very easy guy to work with. He like, one thing I could never do with Jean-Claude, I couldn't do a 2-page dialogue scene without any cuts, okay? Because he couldn't do that much dialogue in one take, but Dolph could do it. Dolph could memorize his lines, do his lines perfectly. I could do a 2-minute long take with Dolph, and it would be perfect. I wouldn't have to cut into it. And he was very professional, really a pleasure to work with. But the movie I did with Dolph was it was a bad script. I didn't write it. I wasn't allowed to rewrite it, and we had a very, very low budget. So It's probably my worst movie, actually, Last Patrol. Although it was a pleasure to work with Dolph, and I had a fun time making the movie. We were in Israel the whole time. So nothing but good experiences, but the movie itself didn't, just because you're having a good time making the movie doesn't mean the audience is going to have a good time watching the movie. We had a lot of problems making Double Impact, a lot of problems making Lionheart, but we got through them, and those movies are classics. One movie that you're leaving out, which is surprising, because it's my capoeira movie, and there's a lot of Portuguese-speaking Brazilians in it, and that's Only the Strong.
Yes, with Mark and
Mark Dacascos, right?
And it was the movie that introduced him to
the world.
To the world, yeah.
Yeah, because before that he'd only been, I think he played in a villain in a very low-budget canon movie called American Samurai, and he was the bad guy in that. So Only the Strong was his first starring role, and he's done, he's had quite a career since that movie, so it really launched him.
I know that you have worked in Max, this
right, my dog movie. Yeah.
And do you have any other films that are now coming?
No, there's a few that I've worked on. We did location scouting, we did pre-production, but they just did not get off the ground. I wrote another dog movie called Metro Dog, which takes place in Moscow. And we were going to shoot in Moscow and in Belgrade. I actually went all around Moscow, scouted the Moscow metro. It's about these dogs that live in the metro in Moscow. It's a real thing. There really are packs of dogs that live in those metros, and they ride the metro trains. So that was one that we spent a lot of money on pre-production, but it just never got off the ground. Then there was a project I worked on a couple of years ago about it takes place during the Revolutionary War in America. And it was about a general who trained George Washington's troops at Valley Forge. And this guy was German. His name was Baron von Steuben. I thought he was a really intriguing character. So there were other foreign generals that came from Europe to help train the American army because everybody disliked the British at the time. So there were military people from France, Germany, lots of countries. So this is called the Baron of Valley Forge because he went by Baron von Steuben. And that could be a really magnificent historical movie. Just hasn't gotten off the ground yet. Hopefully it will.